Thanks, Sarah. I'll kick us off. I'm Colleen Chris with Paymerang, Vice President of Business Development, and I oversee all of our partnerships. So I have the wonderful pleasure of working with Sarah and the team at Leading Age Maryland, as well as Leading Age National. And we're thankful for this opportunity. So I just wanted to, first of all, start it off by saying thank you for your time. We know you guys are busy, you have a lot going on. So thank you for carving out a little bit of time for us this afternoon. And I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Nick Miller, who's also part of our Leading Age team here at Paymerang.
Great. Thank you so much, Sarah and Colleen. Before I kind of dive into a long presentation, I'd like to share a little bit just about myself. I've been at Paymerang for about 3 years or so. I started on our inside sales team, and I've kind of transitioned to oversee sales for leading age communities across the country. From Northern Virginia, so not far from a lot of you in Fairfax County. Went to VCU. Paymerang is based here in Richmond, Virginia, so kind of just stayed here in the Richmond area. Today, I'm going to talk about something a lot of you I know have heard all about this year, the great tsunami, the great resignation, and turnover, and some of the problems that's causing throughout the business office. And this extends past caregivers, but really extends into the business office, causing ripple effects. I'm sure a lot of you have seen. We've seen a lot of turnover at the C level when it comes to CFOs retiring early. And there's really just been a lot of change throughout the business office that hopefully automating some of these processes can save time to relocate on more valuable resources throughout the community. It's causing added stress. We're seeing a rise in payment fraud. I'm sure a lot of you have seen stories like that on the news. You've probably seen more email and business compromise attempts over the last year or so. I'm going to talk a little bit about that and the additional workload and stress that the business office is really facing and how to combat some of these problems. So just a little bit about Paymerang before I kind of dive in here. We are founded in 2010. We have been in the senior living space about 6 months or so prior to the COVID-19 pandemic. So certainly an interesting time. Fueling automation has helped communities kind of fight through this pandemic and rely more on central tasks around the community because, time is more precious now than ever. We joined Leading Age Maryland earlier this year. Myself and Colleen were at the annual conference just a few weeks ago. Hopefully I was able to meet a few of you face to face. It's been great over this year connecting with people face to face, but we're partnered with Leading Age on the national level as well. Based here in Virginia, I have a number of clients here in Virginia and throughout the country. But we don't just work in senior living. So we have clients in healthcare, media, education, banking, really any industry you can think of across the board. We're currently processing billions of dollars of payments each year to over 600,000 vendors on our network. We're considered a best-in-class electronic payment solution because we don't just issue cards or ACH. We'll pay vendors a variety of ways, whether it be ACH, card, or check, kind of saving manual work there. We're partnered with Visa for those card payments when it comes to manual work flow. So that's just all I'll kind of share about Paymerang to start. We'll kind of touch Paymerang's reach across the country again, not just in senior living. In senior living specifically, we're working with just over 200 communities across 20 different states, helping to automate some of these processes in the accounting world and in the business office. But Paymerang's reach as a whole as a company, we're working in all 50 states. So turnover trends, and I know everyone has heard about the great resignation this year or the turnover tsunami or whatever label has been put on it. Estimated about 65% of employees this year plan to stay with their employer. This number has jumped tremendously. So a lot of employees are already thinking of other options, and this has caused communities a great deal of valuable resources and time looking for replacements. We all know it's a lot easier to keep good functioning employees at communities. That way resources aren't spent looking for good culture fits and whatnot. It's much easier to keep current employees happy. And this is caused by just numerous things. Pandemic burnout is real, and a lot of you have seen that. A lot of people have just kind of reevaluated what they want to do, their role, or just feel like they need kind of a break here. So causing ripple effects really throughout communities and in the business office. 74% of businesses have reported trouble filling open positions, and this number is obviously much higher in senior living. This is just companies across the board. In senior living, this is probably much closer to 100%. I'm sure everyone is feeling these pains. I know a recent ACA NCAL report has estimated, I believe their number was 94% of communities are currently facing staffing shortages. I'd like to find those other 6% because it seems like it's just everywhere in senior living. 75% of communities also, based on that same ACA report, have said their work situation is in fact worse now than it was in 2020. So feeling a great deal of pain here. And really that's kind of what I'll focus on throughout the presentation is how to eliminate some of this manual work and really focus on tasks around the community that are more centric to day-to-day operations and can really keep older adults happy. And here, labor statistics, I know we've all felt this firsthand, but here's just a graph kind of illustrating labor statistics. You see, obviously, the spike in the quits rate directly correlates with COVID. So over the last 20 years or so, this data is kind of spread out. But issues organizations are facing as a whole, I'll dive into here on this next slide. Staff turnover right now, obviously detrimental. Drop in productivity, and obviously because if you have less people at your community, less people doing this work, productivity is naturally going to drop. And this has created a great deal of added stress and pressure, which can lead to more errors in the business office. And then ultimately, that's what we're trying to reduce, the amount of errors and saving time. So as stress builds, you might, make a payment late, vendor relationships with certain vendors might slip through the cracks because you're focusing on other things and you might just forget about a bill to be paid or something along the lines of that. So really, that's really been kind of an adverse ripple effect people have faced. Friends as mentors, obviously, you've probably seen leave work has caused morale to drop, which can create even higher turnover. So that's something certainly communities are facing. And then last but not least, I'll touch on the fraud element. We could go on and on what we see on our ends when it comes to fraud. But fraudsters and criminals are using all of this information to their advantage. When it comes to business email compromise, they're smarter than ever. We see it on our ends. Finding ways, and really one wrong click can be disastrous to a community. And when stress is up and when people are more, crunched for time, these mistakes and can just cause ripple effects throughout a community with business email compromise. And we see this on our end on a day-to-day basis, fraudsters trying to, harm our clients. And I'm sure you've seen news stories throughout the country. So what can your organization do to prevent turnover? And this is a polling question. So feel free to unmute yourself or just drop the letter in the chat, whatever is easiest. But here are just a few things companies can do. And I'm curious what your communities have done to kind of relieve some of these problems. So obviously signing bonuses, increased pay, adding temporary staff, training development and opportunities, obviously crucial. And I know a lot of these factors, more than one could apply. So you can drop in multiple letters or kind of whatever is most relevant, you think. But I'll kind of pause here for a second just to let those letters come in. Or if none of these apply, feel free to drop that in the chat or unmute yourself as well. But these are just things organizations are doing across the country to kind of combat some of these turnover woes. Again, signing bonuses, increased pay, adding temporary staff, and then training and development opportunities.
Looks like we got one reply for B, C, and D.
Yeah, great to know. For our own curiosity as well. Okay, great. Yeah, you can use certainly multiple of these things. I know will apply in a lot of cases.
I guess, Nick, we could also pause to see, are there other things that maybe aren't on the list that you guys are doing that you've seen work to help prevent turnover with your staff?
Yeah, absolutely. And if it's easier to unmute, you can go ahead and do that or drop in the chat. We'll just wait a minute or two. But if not, yeah, happy to move along. I see another chat.
Okay, looks like paying incentive pay for nursing staff who pick up extra shifts. Okay, so rewarding, so tying it back to kind of the pay. Interesting. Thank you for entertaining that question. I was just curious to see if there was anything that maybe we hadn't accounted for. So thanks, Heather.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you. So kind of moving along to how businesses are responding to some of these issues. And actually, I think I hit the wrong button. Oop, let me go back. There you go. So how businesses are responding. Again, we talked a lot about this, but signing bonuses, higher salaries, flexible work arrangement, employee training. So just some ways these issues are being combated. We know now accounts payable is busier than ever today. So when it comes to accounts payable processing, most organizations have a lot of work to do when it comes to efficiency. A lot of people are kind of stuck in their ways when it comes to cutting checks or processing invoices that we've found. And these are really ways just to free up manual time across the community. So accounts payable professionals are also, it's estimated that they're working 3 hours longer, estimatedly, and this is by IOFM. And incredibly, 80% of accounts payable professionals are working even more than that. So 3 hours is the average, but a great deal is actually working more than that, those 3 hours. And if overtime was a factor, a lot of professionals say they'd be working even longer hours. So that limits those numbers as well. Next step. So employee turnover, we all know, is inevitable. People are going to leave. The more we can focus on being efficient as communities and really get rid of as much busy work as possible. That's the goal, is to eliminate that busy work and free up time spent on other tasks. So I know the next polling question coming up, it kind of ties into that busy work. So just this is more just out of curiosity. What do you think the biggest inefficiency is in your accounts payable process? Is it printing checks, stuffing envelopes, and mailing payments? Is it storing, archiving, and relocating those documents? Is it fractional approval systems and workflows, or is it the manual reconcilement? And again, we know multiple of these can apply, so feel free to drop in multiple letters, or if there's something we missed, feel free to share that as well. Looks like Heather says A, B, and D. So a great deal. And this is pretty common. Storing, archiving those documents can take up a lot of manual work. Obviously, because of some of the stresses the USPS has overtaken over the last year or so, they've gotten slower as well, which we've seen really heighten that problem, particular following up on checks and that manual reconcilement as well, that D number. Or letter, excuse me. But thank you, Heather. Anything else that kind of jumps to mind? Feel free to, I'll just pause here for another 15 seconds or so. Great. Well, thanks, Heather. And we'll move on to the next slide. So again, AP staff, like we addressed, is bogged down. According to the Institute of Finance and Management, 84% of the typical AP person's day is spent on manual tasks. So we really want to push this number as low as possible and free up that time to think on other things around the community. To really, the goal here is to reduce that 84% number, and I'll reference that as I go out throughout the presentation. But really, we want to push this number down as low as possible. We know there always is going to be some manual work, of course. So a lot of this is inevitable, but 84% is a lot of busy work being done. And really, we're going to focus on how we can reduce that 84%. So another polling question, how are you processing your invoices today? We know a lot of that 84% is that invoicing process. So is everything coming in through paper? And when I say electronic here, I'm more curious if there's a centralized mailbox that those invoices are coming to. So is it mostly paper, or a few emails being delivered to that document or that email for those invoices? Is it more electronic and some paper, or is it all electronic with automation? And talking to CFOs and finance teams around the country and leading edge members, a lot of this work is paper. So I'm curious to see if that's kind of your experience. If everything's paper, have you shifted over to a centralized email box and gotten vendors to send invoices that way? Okay, some great information here. So actually some more electronic than I've seen. This is great that a lot of emails are being routed electronically. It seems like there's still some manual tasks being done, but it's good to see that some of you are getting invoices delivered electronically. And really, that's something, a pretty easy fix. You can set up a centralized email box, pretty easy. Reach out to your vendors. In today's time, more are receptive to delivering those electronically. So here's invoice automation as a whole, and this is really what's going to save some of that time. Obviously, you don't need to go with the Paymerang method, but we would love that. But kind of the benefits of invoice automation, excuse me. You're saving time come auditing season because you have an electronic audit trail. You're improving posting accuracy, and again, reducing those errors mentioned before through artificial intelligence. That'll pick up on a lot of those errors. So you're electronically routing a lot of invoices, less paper in communities, able to kind of free up some space with those filing cabinets, and then that data capturing reduces that total processing time. And here's just a great graphic that really illustrates the difference between if you're getting those invoices done through paper and all the manual steps that go into keying in those invoices into your accounting software, going into writing them for different approval. So, you're running papers throughout communities, coding those invoices manually. It's just a lot more work to scan and code those invoices yourself versus if you went to an automated method where you're really cutting down on that 84% previously mentioned, routing those invoices for approval, and pushing them straight into your ERP, really saving a lot of manual time around the community and in the business office. Easy as 1, 2, 3, or I should say 1, 2, 3, 4 here. In this case, you're receiving that invoice automation into a queue. The data is going to be extracted through artificial intelligence and machine learning. You're approving those invoices really just at a click of a button, and then you're uploading that file into an ERP system. So those are just the benefits of an invoice automated program versus if you're still manually keying in that data. Here's another polling question. So how do you process your vendor payments today? So that's kind of the other side of this manual work. Is everything done through check? Are there some checks, but still some electronic? Is it a mixture, mostly electronic, some check, or mostly check and some electronic, or it's all electronic and you have a system in place? And by electronic, I mean ACH payments as well, if they're being, straight through. So everything is check. Good to know. Yeah, that's pretty common from what I see in communities. Maybe 90-10, maybe a few ACH payments here and there. But a good bulk of checks are still paid, or a good bulk of vendors are still paid manually through paper check. Great. Yeah. So it seems like the majority, mostly everything is still coming by check. And that's another piece where you can save a lot of time. And I'll kind of dive in here as we go along. But when it comes to payment automation, things get a lot more simplified. You're really just pushing one file from your accounting software, and you're having someone else reach out to your vendors and find their preferred payment method. So you're not doing this work. There's a lot of fractional solutions, and a lot of those can cause really even more stress on the finance office because you're having to figure out who's being paid by what solution. So you're getting better cash management because you're just uploading that one file and then you're just reconciling that one file, reducing errors when it comes to payments. Obviously, a lot of that shifts over to someone else. Errors could be, writing the wrong number on a check. It could be as simple as someone on the vendor side fat fingering a button and overcharging a credit card if you are doing credit card payments. And then obviously check fraud is still the #1 form of fraud. So you don't want to put your banking information at risk every time you send out a check. Your banking information is at risk to potentially be intercepted. So I would encourage everyone, if they're not using Positive Pay, to look into Positive Pay. If that's your main takeaway from the presentation, that's great. Positive Pay is a program banks provide typically, and we provide it too as a check processor, but it really just prevents that. It's another way, if a check does get intercepted, they're comparing everything to that Positive Pay file that either the bank or a third party would have, really just protecting your community from check fraud, because even though ACH fraud is on the rise, check fraud is still the most rampant form of payment fraud, and fraudsters are getting more clever, going in through PO boxes, and it can be as simple as them just going through a PO box, changing one number, and overcharging your community. End-to-end automation when it comes to payments, again, not tracking down stale payments. All the follow-up is shifted to someone else's plate. So you're not manually tracking down payments, that sort of thing. Your bank recon gets that much easier because you're just reconciling that one file. Fraud, you're shifting a lot of that fraud, like we mentioned with positive pay, but you're shifting that fraud somewhere else. And you really want someone who's going to handle that checks, ACH, and card payments. ACH in-house is always a dangerous game because if someone is to hack into your accounting software, they have access to all that information. So if you are going to make ACH payments, you should look into a third-party provider who will kind of handle that ACH information. And it'll usually be stored somewhere else on the cloud. That way it's not in your ERP or general accounting system, because if someone gets in there, it can be devastating because they have all that banking information. So just a number of things that you're doing today, obviously, that would shift over with an automated system. Really just as simple as a touch of a button, you're uploading a file to usually a for benefit of account. For us, it is similar to how a payroll service would work. And then you're reconciling that one payment file. So you're saving a lot of time there. You're not tracking down stale checks. Your bank recon just gets that much smoother and more efficient. And then a provider is handling the rest. So everything is really done just at the click of a button. Again, pushing down that 84% workload and really trying to get that number as low as possible. So you're focused on tasks throughout the community. I've touched on a lot of these already, but why you would automate an AP process. You become more agile as a community. You save up that time. You can spend it on however you like. Paperless workflows. I'm sure a lot of you have filing cabinets. And you can really eliminate all of that. You really want, when you're looking for a program, you want something that's stored historically, especially on the invoice side. That way you can always, find that paper on the cloud. It's all on your computer. You're not, going through old invoices from 15, 20 years ago. And come auditing time, you're not digging up, an audit from 7, 8 months ago and trying to figure out the invoice. From a security standpoint, we touched on positive pay, ACH, fraud. When it comes to credit card information, usually we will provide one-time use automated cards, so no vendors can store that card information on file. If you're using just like a P card for expenses, you do have to remember that information is, a lot of people have that credit card information, and just be cognizant of that. So a lot of what I get asked is, what is my team going to do with this added time? And there's a number of things, and this kind of builds into the turnover problem. So, they can set deadlines. They can negotiate rates with vendors because they're getting their funds that much earlier. Sometimes you can negotiate special rates with vendors. I've seen that. They can advance their careers. They can categorize vendors again, and they can eliminate duplicate payments. Really just have more control over their day-to-day life. Again, you're pushing down that 84% number that we mentioned earlier, and you're paying vendors with a touch of a button. So you're really reducing the amount of manual work done and protecting against fraud attacks. So what will your team do with added time? It's really up to you. Now, I'm sure 5, 6, 7 hours of your day could be spent on tasks around the community, especially with this work first problem. In other departments, you can care for your residents better and really just find ways to help out. There's plenty of work to be done right now. So I really don't think that's a big issue. You can find plenty of work around the community. So this notice is just this is just historical data of people who do automate AP and what they've noticed. So 82% of them have noticed a marginal improvement in their day-to-day operations. 16% said the process is about the same. And it will be a process change when you automate a lot of this work. So once you kind of get up and running on this new process, it's going to free time. And then the process had been worse. I would guess this is based on fractional solutions. So if you're having, certain bills paid through a process where they're only paying 25-30% of your vendors, you got to keep track of who they're paying. You got to keep track of really you got to think, is that really going to be saving me much time? Or my process is in fact going to increase. I'm going to be spent doing more time on that back end work of AP. So I'm guessing that's where that 2% comes from. But that is the presentation in a nutshell. Happy to answer any questions at this time, or if the chat's easier, you can pop them in there. Here's my email and phone number, always available to answer any questions. But any thoughts, concerns, comments, things you didn't think were quite right, feel free to drop them in the chat or unmute yourself.
Nick, thank you so much just for the practical steps that you gave. I really appreciate that. We all know that the challenges are out there, but for some practical steps were really helpful and ideas. Would you say that there's maybe one, if we're just getting started thinking about this, is there really one first step that you would say, if you do anything or talk about anything with your teams, what would that kind of first step, or possibly just first conversation with people's teams would be?
Yeah, great question, Sarah. I would say, yeah, that's a great first step, is to figure out how much manual time is actually spent on these tasks. So, I would ask, whoever's spending the time to cut those checks, what percentage of their day do you think is spent on coding those invoices in manually? And really just trying to think about where your invoices are and where they've been over the last few months. Are they in a filing cabinet? Are you able to access them easily? And then thinking about, how easy is that process to find old invoices? I would say start there. And then from a security standpoint, I would always say start with positive pay if that's not in place, because check fraud is so high. At the very least, have a conversation with your bank and figure out the added cost of positive pay, because it's really, I think, worth it.
Thanks, Nick. Yeah, sometimes change seems just so difficult because we've been doing it this way forever. And so the thought of even, making a change can be difficult. So thank you so much for that. I think just, the first having the conversation, seeing what the actual data is of how long it's taking you to do a task, and talking about that. If there's a more simplified way to approach the work that we do, we need to move towards that efficiency. So,
yep, absolutely.
Thanks, Nick. There is a question here in the chat from Jessica. Does Paymerang integrate/connect with any software solutions? And if so, do you have any examples of what platforms? Great question, Jessica. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, great question. So we are what we call ERP agnostic. So we'll work with pretty much any accounting software out there, on the payment piece in particular, because we really just need a file. And nowadays, pretty much every accounting software allows that file. So obviously in senior living, Point Click Care, Matrix Care are very popular. We actually recently just joined the Point Click Care marketplace and are partnered with them and are working on a direct API. So it wouldn't be a file upload case. So there are certain softwares where we have that direct API. I know on the invoice piece, Sage is one as well, Sage Intact. But really any accounting software we will work with as long as we can get that payment file, which is, I don't think we've ever as a company ran into a prevalent accounting software that we have not been able to work with. But great question. And yeah, that's the other kind of piece when you're thinking about automating some of your processes. I know dashboards have become much more popular. So you want to just make sure those dashboards are aligned with other softwares you are able to use, because if not, it can actually add to the manual tasks being done.
And Nick, the question here, follow-up question, is it one way or two way?
It is, so depending on, it is just one upload. So you're just pulling that file. So it is just one way. The data will not be communicated from Paymerang back to the accounting software. So generally speaking, we want that accounting software to remain your central source of record. You want one central source of record. And then Paymerang or whatever payment provider is just automating and enhancing that accounting software, ideally. So they're not communicating back and forth. Typically, it's just one way.
Thanks, Nick.
Yep, absolutely.
Jessica, great question. Jessica, any other questions?
None come to mind right now. Just interesting to hear, and always interested to learn about new platforms that I haven't heard of. So thank you for the presentation.
Yeah, absolutely. We greatly appreciate the time. Thank you, Jessica.
And thank you.
Any
Heather.
other questions or final thoughts? Okay. Well, thank you so much, Nick, for your presentation, for Colleen, for you being here, for being sponsors here at Leading Age Maryland and with Leading Age National. We appreciate your partnership with us. This recording will go out into our digest this week. And so if anyone has any questions, we'll also attach information that you can contact Nick or Colleen if you have questions after this presentation or as you share this recording with your teams. We'll share the information as well. Thank you so much, and I hope that everybody has a great rest of the day.
Thank you, Sarah. You too. Take care, everyone.